Hello, and welcome to the second installment of our Death and Dying series. This is our Lenten series for 2025, and this recording will cover what we discussed on Tuesday, March 18th. And if you're listening to this, perhaps you weren't able to join and you'd like to hear a bit more about our topic, or you did join and you'd like to have a resource. Either way, we are very glad that you're here and grateful to you for listening. So our topic this week is on death cafes. And let me give you a bit of an introduction about that, as well as kind of a recap of what we talked about last week. So last week, Reverend Will gave us an introduction to death and dying well and Christian thought, which, of course, we were able to cover in about 45 minutes. Obviously not. So as we'll see over the course of these weeks, there is a lot that we have to uncover in terms of our own personal, spiritual, and theological approach to an understanding of death and dying well as followers of Christ. This week, we spent the majority of our programming time with our neighbors in small groups to focus on a little something called Death Cafe. Now, because this is a voice recording, we're not really able to transcend this medium into a small group activity, but I'm hoping that with this recording, you will be able to kind of facilitate a death cafe of your own, whether it be with a loved one, maybe your partner or family or friends, or maybe just yourself. Maybe you're going on a walk and you'd like to contemplate some of the items that we'll discuss today. If you don't know anything about Death Cafe, stick with us and let me tell you a bit more. So Death Cafe as a movement started in 2011 in the UK by the late John Underwood, and we are grateful to him and his inspiring work. Here's what Death Cafe as a movement has to say about itself. At a death cafe, people, often strangers, gather to eat cake, drink tea, and discuss death. Our objective is to increase awareness of death with a view to helping people make the most of their finite lives. A death cafe is a group-directed discussion of death with no agenda, objectives, or themes. It is a discussion group rather than a grief support or counseling session. Our death cafes are always offered on a not-for-profit basis, in an accessible, respectful, and confidential space, with no intention of leading people to any conclusions, product, or course of action, alongside refreshing drinks and nourishing food. End quote. So that is from the Death Cafe website, and I do recommend that you look that up and learn a bit more about what they've done. And as you can tell, that this is a voice recording, and part of the Death Cafe movement is to create an accessible, respectful, and confidential space. So we decided not to record the session from Tuesday so that we could give folks their privacy, so that they would feel safe sharing with neighbor and not having it last in perpetuity. So if you ever do find a death cafe in the future, or if you're able to join perhaps one at the church in the future, I definitely recommend you do that if you enjoyed today's recording. So why did we bring Death Cafe to our church this Lent? Well, death, change, transformation, renewal, they touch all of us and most of the aspects of our lives, especially as followers of a crucified God, especially as humans who have great capacities to love and great capacities to grieve. That's why we've brought Death Cafe to our church. So before we begin, let's get into a little bit of housekeeping. As I said, this is a recording just of my voice. We're not recording the actual session. Towards the end of this recording, I will provide about a dozen guiding questions for you to review and contemplate. And I'd like you to think of these as a conversation that I'm having with you, rather than fixed questions that you need to respond to or fixed items that you need to accomplish or get to. That's not the case. Really, the idea is that these questions should only be used if the group or the individual, the listener in this case, has exhausted open and natural conversation. So even though there are questions, really the idea of Death Cafes is to lean into some of that awkwardness, into that silence and discomfort. This is what a Death Cafe organizer in Columbus, Ohio, likes to say. Our view is that when it comes to death, people have enough to discuss already. So the only thing that really you would need to do if you were to attend a Death Cafe is to introduce yourself and share what brought you here today. All right, so I am going to read some of the questions, and I invite you to listen and to pause the audio if you can. I'll also give about 5 to 10 seconds between each question and reflect either out loud, in your head, in your heart, prayerfully to God on these questions that I'm asking you. And I'd like you to envision being in a room with others and really having this conversation in kind of a cafe setting. And to make it more comfortable, why don't you get a hot beverage? Or maybe you're listening to this later in the spring or summertime and it's hot out, maybe a cold beverage. Wear something comfortable, sit in a comfortable position. If you're walking, maybe put in your headphones. And I will ask the questions, give a bit of space for you to reflect on them, and then I will let you go for today. Here are our questions. Reminder, these are not fixed. You can take what you'd like, leave what you don't want. Introduce yourself. What brought you here tonight? If you joined our last session, did anything surprise you? Did you learn anything new about the scope of Christian theology? If you didn't join last session, maybe reach out to someone who did, or reach out to one of the pastors and hear more about our topic from last week. When you think of the words death and dying well, what comes to mind? What is your gut instinct? Why is death such a downer? AKA, why is it so hard to talk about death in our culture? As a Christ follower, has your perspective on death and dying changed as you have gotten older? Imagine an example of a good death that you have witnessed or know of. This can be an example from a movie, TV show, book, play, etc. Or it can be an example from your own personal life. What were the characteristics of this good death? When you imagine your own good death, what do you see? Where would you like to die? Who would you like to be around you? What mementos, books, music, clothes, smells or scents, etc., would you like to be in the room with you as you transition from this life? How would you like to be cared for after you have died? Cremation, burial with embalming, a green burial? Would you like a memorial service or a wake? Would you like to have an obituary published? If so, who would write it? Would you write it yourself before your death? Why? For all of these questions, why are these things important to you? How would you like to be cared for after you have died? How important are death-related rituals to you? These rituals can be memorial services, celebrations of life, All Souls, All Saints Day, Ash Wednesday, Easter, Good Friday. What can Christ's own dying story tell us about ourselves and about death? What about the dying process comforts you, if anything? What about the dying process concerns you, if anything? Can you share some longings or goals that you have about living fully? So these are our possible avenues to explore in a death cafe setting. You'll notice that a lot of these are more in the philosophical end or theological, and kind of the imaginary sense as well. Likely we won't be able to choose how we die. Hopefully we can choose where we die, but that's not always the case either. So I hope you enjoyed this exploration of the mind and the self and relationship with the divine in this moment. If you noticed anything coming up for you related to grief or discomfort, something that could use some spiritual tending to, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or Reverend Will. Our emails are always listed on the church website, and you can easily find us there or catch us after a service. We are always available to give support if needed. And I'd like to leave you with this poem, kind of considering it a prayer, a closing prayer. This is called Let Evening Come by Jane Kenyon. Let the light of late afternoon shine through chinks in the barn, moving up the bales as the sun moves down. Let the crickets take up chafing as a woman takes up her needles and her yarn. Let evening come. Let dew collect on the hoe abandoned and the long grass. Let the stars appear and the moon disclose her silver horn. Let the fox go back to its sandy den. Let the wind die down. Let the shed go black inside. Let evening come. To the bottle in the ditch, to the scoop in the oats, to the air in the lung, let evening come. Let it come as it will, and don't be afraid. God does not leave us comfortless, so let evening come. Thank you for joining us on this Lenten journey. May you be well.